This is about a man who, for many years, was high on the list of America's most wanted criminals. The FBI had been on his trail for a solid 12 years, scouring the country before finally nabbing him. So, what did he do that was so awful? And how did he manage to stay hidden for over a decade? Let's start with the man himself, Yaser Said, born in 1957 in Egypt. Yaser grew up in a pretty big family with 3 brothers and a sister. His dad was quite wealthy by Egyptian standards, and with his father's connections, Yaser could have had a promising future in Egypt. But things took a turn when his dad left the family and cut ties. This meant Yaser lost that safety net. But lucky for him, he had 2 elder brothers who were already in the USA. With a bit of help from them, he made his way to America on a student visa. Though, truth be told, he wasn't much into studying. Instead of hitting the books, he mostly worked, either in his brother's shop or as a taxi driver. Fast forward to 1987, his visa was about to expire, and he needed a good reason to stick around. For Yaser, that reason turned out to be marriage. Here's where things get a bit eyebrow-raising. He chose to marry a 15-year-old named Patricia Owens. By that time, Yaser was already approaching 30, while Patricia came from a less privileged background. He convincingly expressed his love for her, painting vivid images of the splendid future they could share. Winning over the young Patricia wasn't the challenge. The real hurdle was persuading her parents to consent to their daughter marrying a man nearly twice her age. Yaser wooed them with tales of vast lands he owned in Egypt and how wealthy he was by its standards. Eventually, Patricia's parents were swayed. In Texas, where this all transpired, parental consent is sufficient for a minor to marry. With their permission, 15-year-old Patricia Owens became Yaser Said's wife. This union granted Yaser the residence permit he yearned for in the USA. However, it wasn't long before Patricia began to see that Yaser's promises of a blissful life was a lie. In a short span of 6 months, Yaser revealed his oppressive nature at home. He restricted Patricia's communication with her family, dominating every aspect of her life. He exploited his age advantage as a 30-year-old man to dominate and subjugate a 15-year-old girl, both emotionally and physically. By the time Patricia was 18, she had 3 children with Yaser. Their first son, named Islam, was born in 1988 when she was just 16 years old. At the ages of 17 and 18, Patricia had 2 more children, daughters Amina and Sarah. Their elder brother Islam was always the favorite of their father. Islam was granted many liberties that his sisters weren't. For instance, he was the only child allowed to call his mother by her first name, Patricia, whereas Amina and Sarah were always to address her as Patricia Owen. Islam had the freedom to make friends, while the sisters, Amina and Sarah, were confined to their family circle. Essentially, they were each other's only friends. Their closeness in age only strengthened this bond. Despite the constraints of their home life, Amina and Sarah remained spirited and outgoing. Away from the scrutiny of their father, like when they were at school, they effortlessly blended in and connected with their classmates. Yaser's staunch views on family dynamics persisted even after his children were born. He remained the prevailing figure in the family, exerting his influence over not just his wife, but also his daughters. There were times they missed school due to visible bruises, as Yaser forbade them from attending, yet physical maltreatment was just one of their struggles. Child Protection Services stepped in, worried about the Said family's welfare. This happened after the then 9-year-old Amina told her grandmother that Yaser was doing something to her and Sarah that they did not like. After becoming aware of the situation, Patricia moved her daughters to their grandmother's home in a different city. Upon hearing about the incident from her granddaughter, the grandmother promptly contacted Child Protective Services. Following this, a representative from the service conducted interviews with the girls. In her interview, Amina disclosed that her father had sexually assaulted her. Both girls were taken to the hospital for examination. The report stated that the examination did not show any signs of sexual violence. However, based on the examination, it was not definitively confirmed that no such incident occurred. Yaser was subsequently summoned to the police station for questioning regarding a potential case of child molestation. He firmly denied all allegations. Since the investigation was still in its early stages, he wasn't arrested and was released. The very fact that he was accused of such heinous behavior while his daughters and wife were staying at Patricia's mother's house was a source of immense distress for him. He was deeply agitated, firstly because Patricia had taken the girls and left, and secondly, because the girls made such claims about him. As a result, Patricia started receiving an unending series of threatening calls from Yaser. The calls were so consistent that she had to change her phone number. But this didn't stop Yaser. He began to consistently monitor the house where Patricia and the girls were staying. This eventually led to Yaser's arrest due to his persistent threats. However, Yaser's time behind bars was short-lived, as he was released on a bail of $2,500. According to many of Patricia's relatives, in a bid to shield her husband from further incarceration, she coerced her daughters into recanting their prior testimonies. They claimed that their allegations of sexual abuse were fabricated. The girls later stated that they altered their testimony due to their preference to live with their grandmother rather than their father. Consequently, the charges against Yaser were dismissed. In hopes of easing tensions and starting afresh, Patricia, with her daughters in tow, rejoined Yaser, and the family took a 6-month sojourn to Egypt. Following their time abroad, they resettled in Texas. As time passed, Yaser's desire to exert control over his family grew exceedingly excessive. His surveillance wasn't confined to the household. He kept a vigilant eye on his daughter's activities outside as well. This obsession manifested in various ways, including using a video camera to monitor them. As the girls matured and began working at Yaser's local convenience store, he would park outside during their shifts, video camera in hand, scrutinizing their every move. Any hint of friendliness, such as a simple smile extended to a customer, was met with Yaser's disdain. He was deeply perturbed by what he perceived as his daughter's adoption of a Western lifestyle, their friendships and openness to engaging with strangers. This was, however, unsurprising given that they were brought up amidst Western values, as opposed to the more conservative Eastern traditions Yaser held dear. Despite growing up in a Western environment, Yaser's greatest apprehension was the prospect of his daughters forging romantic relationships with Americans, as he had distinct intentions for them. More on this will be discussed later. In 2004, Sarah and Amina started attending Taekwondo classes. Sarah didn't pursue it for long, but Amina's dedication to the sport was driven not just by the martial art itself, but by her budding feelings for a fellow classmate, Joseph Moreno. They were of the same age and their attraction was mutual from their very first meeting. Given the relentless scrutiny from Yaser, the Taekwondo classes were one of the rare opportunities for Amina and Joseph to interact. Their connection was so evident that even their coach began pairing them up during sessions. By the end of 2005 and the start of 2006, Yaser began making frequent trips to Egypt. His absence, and consequently the lapse in his watchful eye, provided Amina and Joseph with more freedom. They didn't just confine their meetings to Taekwondo classes anymore. Amina even got acquainted with Joseph's family, who welcomed her warmly. This bond only deepened their relationship. During these times, the absence of her overbearing father was a source of relief for Amina, yet she was oblivious to the true motives behind his regular trips to Egypt. By 2006, when Amina turned 16, the purpose behind Yaser's frequent visits to Egypt became painfully clear. He took Amina with him on one of these trips, and she soon discerned his intentions. Yaser planned to marry her off in Egypt, specifically to the suitor willing to offer the highest dowry. This turned out to be a 47-year-old Egyptian merchant, a man 31 years older than Amina. However, Amina defied her father's intentions. Despite her genuine fear of him, she steadfastly refused to marry in Egypt, Frustrated and enraged, Yaser had no choice but to return to Texas with his daughter. Once they were back, Yaser vented his anger on Amina, physically assaulting her for derailing his plans. Later on, Amina confided in a friend about her ordeal in Egypt, penning her feelings in a letter. Extracts from her letter read, "He planned to take me there and let men choose me as if I'm some object. I don't want to marry a stranger. I can't do that. I'm not like them. He was discussing with my uncle about the price for daughters. It's driving me mad. They're literally selling us, and at a hefty price." Yet, amidst these challenges, Amina's clandestine relationship with Joseph persevered. Yaser's obsession with surveilling his daughters grew to new extremes. He removed the airbag from Amina's car, installing a GPS tracker in its place. To ensure Yaser remained ignorant of her ongoing relationship with Joseph, Amina saved his contact under a female name in her phone. Moreover, they were meticulous in their text exchanges, censoring their messages. Aware that Yaser might inspect her phone at any moment, discovery of any romantic correspondence would undoubtedly spell disaster. In addition to their digital correspondence, the young lovers also began to exchange heartfelt paper letters. They took pains to hide these letters in their bedroom, managing to keep their secret safe, but only for a while. In 2007, Yaser discovered one of these letters intended for Joseph. Upon realizing that Amina had a boyfriend, he was consumed with rage. In her desperation, Amina tried to deceive her father, claiming the letter was meant for a fictitious boy, a figment of her imagination. But Yaser didn't buy it. He brutally assaulted Amina, attempting to extract from her the true identity of the boy and his residence. Amina was certain that if Yaser discovered Joseph's whereabouts, he would undoubtedly attempt to harm, if not kill him. Despite the severity of the beatings, she refused to betray her boyfriend. However, Yaser's retaliation didn't stop with physical abuse. He mandated the entire family to pack their belongings and relocated them to Louisville, 60 kilometers away from their original residence. This abrupt move meant Amina could no longer attend her taekwondo classes and, as a result, lost her only means of direct contact with Joseph. A few months later, when the dust had somewhat settled, Amina managed to email her taekwondo coach, asking him to relay a message to Joseph. Through this, she informed him about her father's discovery of their relationship and the consequent relocation of her family to another city. Physically meeting became impossible for the young couple, but love found a way. Amina secretly procured a second phone, which she discreetly kept hidden from her father. The young couple started plotting their escape and eventual marriage. Their strategy was to convince Yaser that they had genuinely ceased all communication. This way, if Amina did run away, Yaser wouldn't suspect she was with Joseph. Despite their modest means, the two even exchanged rings, not extravagant gold, but they held genuine significance for the couple. The initial plan was to flee after their high school graduation, which was about 7 months away. However, by the end of 2007, circumstances demanded swifter action. Amina discerned that Yaser intended to move both her and Sarah, who also secretly had a boyfriend, to Egypt. In Egypt, Yaser's plans to marry off his daughters would brook no defiance. Neither Amina nor Sarah wanted this fate. Yaser, sensing that Amina had grown resilient to physical punishment, escalated his threats, menacingly showcasing a pistol and vowing to kill her. These threats appeared so genuine that even Patricia, often under Yaser's thumb, began to waver. On December 26, 2007, with Yaser at work, Patricia made a move, informing their son, Islam, that she, along with Amina and Sarah, would head to the local mall for groceries. They instead embarked on a desperate escape. They drove 500 kilometers to Patricia's aunt's place in Wichita, Kansas, hoping Yaser wouldn't be able to trace them. As a precaution, the trio discarded their SIM cards. It was Islam who first noticed their absence. Alerting his father, Yaser, thrown off guard and having no inkling of their whereabouts, approached the police to report his wife and daughters as missing. In a short span, the police located Patricia and her daughters. Patricia emphasized to the authorities that they left their home voluntarily. She also implored the police not to disclose their location to Yaser. The police, discerning no evident crime and deeming the situation a mere family dispute, opted not to intervene further. Elated with their momentary freedom, Amina swiftly informed Joseph that they had fled from Yaser. Joseph promptly replied, "I'll come to you, just tell me where you are." However, Amina, wary of the risks, replied that it was too soon and refrained from disclosing their exact location. The family then relocated to Tulsa, where they stayed under assumed identities in a hotel. Patricia, one day, revealed her new phone number to her son, Islam. Subsequently, she began receiving a barrage of calls from Islam, Yaser, and their family. They implored her to reunite with her husband. Feeling cornered and realizing she couldn't persuade her daughters to leave with her, Patricia devised a plan. She told them they were heading to Texas to pay respects at their grandmother's grave. While en route, she confessed the real reason for the trip, to return to their father. The revelation terrified both girls. Though the younger daughter, Sarah, reluctantly accepted her mother's decision, Amina was adamant in her refusal. Rather than proceeding to her father's residence, she sought refuge at a friend's place. The subsequent night was tumultuous for Amina. Patricia bombarded her with pleas to come back. She even personally arrived at the friend's house, attempting to forcibly take Amina back. After much coercion, Amina agreed to meet with Yaser. In an uncharacteristic gesture of civility, Yaser proposed a dinner to address the strains in their relationship. The girls, albeit hesitantly, got into Yaser's taxi. Approximately 30 minutes into their journey, the Irving City Police received a distress call from Sarah. The dispatcher's handling of the situation was later criticized heavily. Instead of extracting vital information such as their location or the identity of their assailant, the dispatcher put the call on hold. This lapse resulted in the police failing to pinpoint the call's origin. An hour later, another call came in, this one from a different taxi driver who had made a gruesome discovery: a car with 2 girls inside. In Irving, approximately 30 kilometers from Yaser's residence, the police came upon Yaser's yellow Ford parked outside the Omni Mandalay Hotel. Tragically, inside the vehicle lay the bodies of Amina and Sarah. Amina, positioned in the front seat, had sustained 2 gunshot wounds, one to her face and another to her heart. Meanwhile, Sarah, situated in the back seat, had been struck by 9 bullets, predominantly in the chest. Given the time that had passed since the act, Yaser managed to elude the immediate grasp of the authorities, and a swift manhunt failed to locate him. Days later, a peculiar scene unfolded at the girls' funeral. On one side were Patricia's family and the girls' friends, grieving the tragic loss. Contrasting them were Yaser's relatives, who defended Yaser's actions. They contended that this was an honor killing, asserting that Yaser felt compelled to murder his daughters because he believed they had tarnished the family's honor by engaging in relationships that were not in line with their Muslim heritage. This stance, taken by Yaser's family, was deemed hypocritical by many, given that Yaser himself had married a Christian woman in a Christian ceremony. Yet, many of Yaser's kin not only condoned, but also justified his actions. One of his brothers even audaciously remarked that attendees should consider themselves fortunate to have bodies to bury, hinting that he might have been even more unforgiving. The funeral was not devoid of confrontations. As Amina's boyfriend, Joseph, was present, he was suddenly accosted by the girl's brother, Islam. In a fit of anger, Islam lashed out at Joseph, blaming him for the tragedy and demanding him to leave. Islam's aggressive behavior underscored his complicated emotions. While he mourned the loss of his sisters, there was an evident undertone of sympathy for his father's heinous act. Several months following the tragic incident, Islam began to direct his blame towards his mother, Patricia. The strained relationship reached a point where Islam severed all ties with Patricia. As the investigation progressed, it became evident that the murders were not a crime of passion, but rather a premeditated act. Authorities postulated that after Yaser committed the act, an accomplice likely aided in his escape. Suspicion naturally gravitated towards Yaser's brothers, given that he had 3. Among them, a brother named Yasin attracted particular attention from the police. Friends and acquaintances of the family noted that Yaser and Yasin shared a close bond. Furthermore, Yasin, a New York resident, also had a vehicle registered in Texas, which deepened the intrigue given the state's connection to the crime. However, despite the mounting suspicions, concrete evidence linking Yasin or any other family member to abetting Yaser's escape remained elusive. As a result, no relatives, despite some openly condoning Yaser's actions, faced legal repercussions for potentially assisting a fugitive. Over time, speculation grew that Yaser might have fled the US, possibly seeking refuge in Egypt. Lending credence to this theory was the noticeable pattern of Yaser's son, Islam, embarking on frequent and extended trips to Egypt. Subsequent speculation suggested that Islam was possibly acting as an intermediary, maintaining contact with his father during his clandestine stays. The FBI took notice of Yaser's case, ranking him among the agency's top 10 most wanted fugitives and announcing a reward of $100,000 for information leading to his arrest. Despite the prevailing belief that Yaser had successfully escaped the United States, the truth unraveled differently. Contrary to assumptions, Yaser had not only remained in the US, but had also stayed within the confines of Texas. On August 14, 2017, nearly 9 years post the tragic incident, an intriguing situation arose in the city of Bedford, just 20 kilometers from Irving, the very city where the murders took place. At the Copper Canyon Apartments, a plumbing issue led to a pivotal discovery. When a water leak was reported in one of the units, a plumber attempted entry. Despite his persistent knocks, the door remained unanswered. The plumber tried to unlock the door using his master key, only to find it bolted from the inside. Finally, a middle-aged man relented, unbolting the door and allowing the plumber to address the leak. The incident, seemingly routine, took a significant turn when the plumber relayed the encounter to the apartment complex's manager. The manager, aware that the apartment was leased by Yaser Said and knowledgeable of the charges against Islam's father, showed the plumber a picture of Yaser. The plumber's recognition was immediate. The man he had just seen inside the apartment matched Yaser's photo. Without delay, the manager informed the FBI of the possible sighting. Later that day, an FBI agent approached Islam, requesting permission to search his rented apartment. The situation escalated when Islam declined to cooperate, refusing entry for a search without a warrant. Hours later, the FBI managed to secure a search warrant. However, when they forcefully entered the premises around 1 in the morning, the place was vacant. Notably, the agents found the sliding glass door, which opened to a balcony overlooking a courtyard. Below, the bushes appeared crushed, indicating that someone might have jumped down. Strewn among these bushes were numerous cigarette butts, which was notable as Islam, the renter of the apartment, didn't smoke. DNA from the cigarette butts found on the balcony and from a toothbrush inside the apartment was matched to the wanted Yaser. Although it seemed apparent that Yaser had been in the apartment, he had successfully evaded them. When questioned, Islam didn't admit to any involvement. They could have arrested him for aiding a fugitive, but for reasons unknown, perhaps believing Islam might unintentionally lead them to Yaser, they refrained. This approach seemingly paid off, but only 3 years later. In August 2020, the FBI began surveillance on a residence in the city of Justin, registered in the name of one of Yasin's daughters. On August 17th, agents observed both Islam and Yasin delivering bags of groceries to the house. They remained there for 2 hours and later departed with full trash bags. Despite no one else entering the home, a dark silhouette was spotted behind the windows. After about another week of surveillance, the FBI decided they had sufficient evidence to act. On August 26th, at 5:30 p.m., a capture team stormed the house. Inside, they found Yaser, who had been on the FBI's most wanted list for years. Following this significant apprehension, his son, Islam, and brother were also taken into custody. The trial for Said took place in August 2022. Despite the seemingly clear-cut evidence, Yaser maintained his version of the events. He vehemently denies the accusations of killing his daughters. As per his account, he intended to dine with his daughters and address their issues over dinner. En route, he perceived that they were being tailed by one or more vehicles. Believing he was the target, Yaser made the decision to abandon the car, leaving his daughters behind in the hopes that the pursuers would follow him instead. When he left them, they were unharmed and alive, and he claims ignorance regarding their eventual murder. The jury, however, found his narrative unconvincing. In the conclusion of the trial, Yaser Said was convicted of murdering his daughters. Such an offense is punishable by death in Texas, but the prosecutor, for undisclosed reasons, did not seek the death penalty. Consequently, Yaser was sentenced to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. Additionally, Yaser's son, Islam Said, admitted guilt to charges of aiding and abetting a fugitive and conspiracy to harbor a fugitive. He was given a 10-year prison sentence. Yaser's brother, Yasin, faced a 12-year sentence for similar charges.